I had been away for almost 2 weeks, and the trip had drained me more than I expected. It was supposed to last another 3 days, but I wrapped up early. The meetings were finished, the work was done, and all I wanted was to come back home to the quiet of my ranch. My ranch had always been more than just land with a house. It was my safe space, my own corner of peace, a place where I could breathe and recharge. The drive back was long, but comforting. Once I left the city behind, the roads got emptier and the air smelled different. I rolled down my window just to take in the scent of open fields. There's something about heading home after being away for too long that makes every mile feel lighter, like your chest loosens up the closer you get. The sun was just starting to lean toward the west when I pulled into the county road that led to my ranch. I knew every curve, every tree, every broken fence post. That road was like a part of me. But something felt a little off that evening. Even before I reached my gate, I saw a couple of cars parked along the shoulder. I slowed down, frowning. People rarely parked out there. It wasn't exactly a public area. It was my private property. At first, I thought maybe hunters or hikers had stopped. Sometimes people got lost and pulled over. But as I drove closer, I noticed more vehicles scattered along the side road leading toward my entrance. Not just 1 or 2, 5, maybe 6. It made my stomach twist. My first thought was, did something happen? An accident, maybe? But as I turned into the gravel drive and rolled past the front fence, what I saw didn't look like an emergency. It looked like a gathering. A group of people stood near my gate, holding papers, talking to each other like they were waiting for something. Some leaned against their cars, some were holding bottled water, and a few kids ran around kicking at the dirt. I slowed the truck, my pulse quickening. What in the world was going on? Nobody had told me about anything like this. There were no events planned on my ranch. There never were, unless I arranged them. I rolled down my window and asked the first man standing near the entrance, "Can I help you folks?" He looked up casually and said, "We're here for the tour." For a second I thought he was joking. "The what?" I asked. "The ranch tour," he said, lifting up a flyer. He waved it as if that explained everything. "Said in the ad it starts around 5. I blinked at him, completely thrown. "What ad?" He shrugged like it wasn't his problem. "The one online. Community Ranch Day, free to the neighborhood, that's what it said." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. My ranch, being advertised. I didn't say anything more to him, just nodded stiffly and drove past the gate. My mind was racing. As soon as I pulled into the main drive, my stomach dropped again. The scene ahead didn't look real. There were more people, families, couples, kids, walking around my front yard like it was a park. Some were even near the barn, snapping pictures like it was some sort of tourist stop. And right in the middle of it all, standing tall with her hands on her hips, was someone I knew all too well. The neighbor from down the road. The one who had appointed herself as the unofficial boss of the entire homeowners association. Even from the distance, I recognized her, the stiff stance, the smug look, the clipboard in her hand. She wasn't just there. She was in charge. I parked the truck and got out slowly, trying to process the sight. This was my land, my private property. I hadn't given permission for anyone to be here, and yet somehow my front yard looked like it had been turned into a community fairground. I walked toward the house, keeping my eyes on the crowd. My boots crunched against the gravel, and a few people glanced at me like I was some stranger wandering in. That feeling hit me hard, strangers treating me like I didn't belong at my own ranch. A woman with a stroller smiled at me and said, "Excuse me, do you know where we check in for the hayride?" Hayride? My ranch didn't have a hayride. "I think there's a mistake," I told her carefully. "This isn't a public ranch." But she just laughed lightly like I was pulling her leg and said, "Oh, that's funny. The lady in charge said it was all set up." And then she pointed right at the HOA woman. I clenched my jaw, heat rising in my chest. The puzzle pieces started clicking together in my head, but the picture they formed didn't make any sense. Why would she think she could turn my ranch into some sort of community attraction? I took a breath and forced myself to stay calm as I headed straight toward her. She spotted me right away, and instead of looking guilty or surprised, She smiled wide like she had been waiting for me. "Oh, you're back early," she said in that loud, condescending voice she always used when she wanted everyone else to hear. "What a nice surprise." I stopped in front of her, staring. "What's going on here?" I asked flatly. She spread her arms as if she were presenting a gift. "Isn't it wonderful? I thought it was such a shame for this beautiful ranch to just sit unused while you were away. So I organized a little community event. Look at the turnout." I couldn't even believe the words leaving her mouth. "You organized this?" "Of course," she said proudly. "People love the outdoors, and this place is perfect for it. You should be thanking me. This brings value to the whole neighborhood." I glanced around at the crowd. Some folks were now heading toward my barn, some were poking around my garden, and a few were near the horse corral as if they belonged there. My blood was boiling. "This is private property," I said firmly. "You can't just invite people here." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just the neighborhood. Everyone's enjoying themselves. And besides, it's under the HOA's umbrella, which technically means it's community managed." I almost laughed at how absurd that was. The HOA had no authority over my ranch. This wasn't some shared playground. It was land I bought, paid for, and maintained with my own sweat. But she just kept smiling, as if she had done me a huge favor. At that moment, I realized something very clearly. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. She had taken it upon herself to act like my ranch was her project, her way to show off control. The anger building inside me was hard to swallow, but I knew exploding right there would only make things worse. The people didn't know the truth. They thought this was some open house I had agreed to. They weren't the problem. She was. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Shut this down, now." Her smile faded into a scowl, and for the first time that evening, the tension thickened in the air. When I told her to shut it down, she didn't move. She crossed her arms instead, like she was the one who owned the land. The way she looked at me was the same way she looked at everyone else in the neighborhood, like we were children and she was the one in charge. "I don't think you understand," she said slowly, as if I was too dense to keep up. "This event is already underway. Families have come out, people are enjoying themselves, and frankly, shutting it down now would make you look very bad. Imagine how disappointed all these folks would be." Her tone wasn't just smug, it was coated in that syrupy fake politeness she always used when she wanted to make others feel guilty. I took a deep breath. "This isn't about disappointment. This is my property. You didn't ask permission, you don't have the right to do this." She tilted her chin up. "This ranch is part of the community. You live under the HOA, and our charter says properties must contribute to the overall image of the neighborhood. I'm simply making sure your land is being used to its fullest potential." I stared at her, stunned. The nerve it took to stand on my land and say those words, like my home was nothing but a stage for her little neighborhood projects, made my jaw clench so tight it hurt. Meanwhile, behind us, more people were arriving. I heard the sound of car doors slamming, voices calling out to one another. Someone dragged a cooler from the trunk of their car and carried it across my lawn as if it were a public park. I turned, and for a moment, I just stood there in disbelief. Kids were running around near the horse corral, throwing handfuls of hay at each other. A couple of teenagers were leaning on the fence, pointing at my horses like they were part of a petting zoo. This wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. My animals weren't toys. They could spook, kick, or bite if someone got too close without knowing what they were doing. I marched toward the corral, ignoring her footsteps behind me. "Hey," I called out firmly. "Step back from the fence. Don't feed the horses, don't touch them, it isn't safe." The teenagers looked at me like I was some overbearing stranger. One of them muttered, "Relax, we're not hurting anything." The words made my blood boil, but I kept my voice level. "This isn't a petting zoo. These are working animals. You need to give them space." The kids rolled their eyes but stepped back a little. Their parents, standing a few feet away, didn't even apologize. They just shrugged as if I was overreacting. And behind me I heard her voice again, sharp and cutting. "See, this is exactly why I needed to step in. You don't know how to engage with the community. You're so closed off. People just want to enjoy what you have here. I'm giving them that chance. I turned back, glaring. What you're giving them is access to something that doesn't belong to you. You can't just decide my ranch is a community center. That's not how this works. But she didn't flinch. She thrived on confrontation, and I could see in her eyes that she was enjoying this. She wanted me angry. She wanted to show everyone that she could stand up to me on my own land. She raised her voice loud enough for the group nearby to hear. Neighbors, don't worry. He's just a little rattled because he wasn't expecting us today. But remember, this event is for all of us. We're here to celebrate community and share this wonderful space. Everyone is welcome. A few people even clapped. My own neighbors standing on my property, applauding her for turning my home into her project. The humiliation of it hit me hard. I felt like I was being erased in front of my own eyes, like my voice didn't matter, like my ownership meant nothing. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone to get off my land right then and there. But I knew if I lost my temper, she would twist it around. She'd tell everyone I was being hostile, that I didn't care about the neighborhood, that I was selfish, and looking around I could see how many people had bought into her act already. So instead I tried another approach. I forced my voice to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. Let me make this clear, I said. This land is mine. I paid for it, I maintain it, and I'm responsible for it. If anyone gets hurt here, that's on me. That's why you can't just bring people here without permission. It's not about being unfriendly, it's about safety and respect. For a moment there was silence. A few people looked uneasy, shifting on their feet. I thought maybe, just maybe, the message had landed. But then she let out a loud laugh, snapping the spell. Oh, stop being so dramatic. Nobody's going to get hurt. You always exaggerate. You should be grateful people even want to come out here. Most of the time, this place just sits empty. Isn't it nice to see it being appreciated? I felt the heat rising in my face, but I bit down on my tongue. If I lashed out, I'd lose. Instead, I turned my back on her and walked toward the house. My phone was in my pocket, and for a second I thought about calling the sheriff right then. But I hesitated. Calling law enforcement would cause a scene, and that was exactly what she wanted. I stepped inside my house, shutting the door behind me, and leaned against it for a moment. My heart was hammering. Through the window, I could see people walking across my lawn like it was theirs. I could hear kids shouting laughter, voices calling out instructions like it was a fairground. It was surreal. I felt like a stranger in my own home. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and tried to think. Part of me wanted to storm back out and demand everyone leave. Another part wanted to sit down and wait it out, see how far she would push it. But one thing was clear. She wasn't doing this just to help the community. She was doing it to prove a point. She wanted everyone to see her as the leader, the one who could control even me, the property owner she had clashed with more than once before. And judging by the way people were following her lead, she was succeeding. I stayed inside for a while, watching from the window. I saw her walking around with that clipboard, handing out little printed flyers to people. She was telling them about the schedule of activities, pointing toward my barn, the fields, the corral. She was giving tours of my ranch, acting like she had every right to do so. It wasn't just arrogance. It was calculated. She had planned this down to the last detail, and I knew deep down that this wasn't going to end with a simple conversation. I finally had enough of watching from the window. Every time I glanced outside, it looked less like my ranch and more like some neighborhood carnival. Cars lined the drive. Kids were chasing each other in the field. And that woman, clipboard in hand, was at the center of it all, directing people around as if she were the owner. The anger inside me had reached the point where I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, letting it slam shut behind me. The sound caught a few people's attention, but not hers. She was too busy talking, pointing at the barn like she was giving a guided tour. I marched straight toward her, and when I reached her side, I didn't lower my voice. "This ends now," I said. She blinked at me, putting on that fake smile again, the one that made her look like she was doing me a favor. "Oh, you're back out. Good timing. We were just about to head toward the barn. I didn't move. You're not taking anyone into my barn?" She tilted her head. "Your barn? Don't be silly. This whole property is part of the neighborhood's shared character. You're not using it, and I am. It's a win for everyone." My fists clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "No, it's not shared. It's mine. And you're trespassing." She actually laughed right there in front of a crowd of people. Trespassing, please. Everyone here knows I'm on the HOA board. That means I represent the neighborhood, and that includes this ranch. I have every right to organize events here. The audacity of her words left me speechless for a second. Around us, some of the neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but not one of them spoke up. They just watched, waiting to see how it would play out. I finally said, "Show me one paper. One single document that says you have the right to invite people onto my land." She raised her chin, looking down her nose at me. "I don't need to show you anything. You always try to hide behind paperwork and rules, but people know better. They see what I'm doing for the community." Her voice was louder now, meant to carry to the people gathered nearby. She wasn't just arguing with me, she was performing. I could feel my jaw tighten. "What you're doing is illegal." Her lips curled into a smirk. "What you call illegal, others call community spirit." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the neighbors nodded, others looked away. I could feel the weight of their stares as if I was on trial in front of them. And she knew it. She thrived on it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "This is my last warning. You end this now, or I'll make sure it ends another way." Her eyes narrowed. She leaned in slightly, still smiling for the audience. "You wouldn't dare. You don't want to be the villain here. Everyone already thinks you're cold and unapproachable. If you shut this down, you'll prove me right." The words stung, not because they were true, but because I could see how easily she manipulated perception. She had turned my own neighbors against me by painting herself as the generous one and me as the grouch. Behind us, I heard a child cry out. I turned and saw two kids climbing the side of the corral, one of them slipping on the rail. My heart jumped into my throat. I rushed over and pulled the child down before they fell. "You can't climb this," I told them firmly but gently. "It's dangerous." The parent jogged up, laughing awkwardly. "They're just curious." "No harm done," I wanted to shout, "no harm yet," but I bit it back. I handed the child over and watched them walk away. When I turned, she was right there, arms crossed, a smug expression on her face. "See, this is why I'm here. You don't know how to handle people. You act like everyone's a burden. I'm here to make it welcoming." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about today. This was about control. She wanted power, not just over the HOA, but over me, over my land, over the way people saw me. I looked her square in the eyes. "You need to leave." She shook her head. "No, you're the one who should leave. You've made it clear you don't want to be part of the neighborhood. Fine, step aside and let someone who cares handle things." I was stunned by her words. "Step aside from my own land?" She said it with such conviction that for a second I wondered if the people around us actually believed her. A couple nearby whispered to each other, casting me wary glances. I caught the words, "He's being difficult and she's just trying to help." It felt like betrayal. These were people who had waved at me from their driveways, borrowed tools from me, even asked me for help with their fences. And now, standing here, they couldn't see what was happening. Or worse, they didn't want to. I turned back to her. "You don't have the authority you think you have. And the more you push this, the more trouble you're bringing on yourself." Her smile faltered just slightly, but she covered it up quickly. "We'll see about that." For a moment, we just stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The crowd was restless now, shifting, murmuring, sensing the tension but not daring to intervene. Then she raised her voice again, projecting it so everyone could hear. "Neighbors, don't let this spoil the evening. The ranch is open to us, whether he likes it or not. We're here to enjoy it, and that's exactly what we're going to do." The people, uncertain but unwilling to argue, began to move again. Some headed toward the barn, others back toward the field. She had won that round, at least in their eyes. I stood there, feeling the ground slip out from under me. It wasn't just my land at stake, it was my dignity. But deep down, I knew something else. If she thought I was going to back down, she was dead wrong. This wasn't over. The sun was sinking lower now, and the light stretched long across the fields. What should have been a quiet evening at home had turned into something I couldn't have imagined. My yard was crowded with cars. My barn was swarming with strangers. And the woman in charge of all of it stood tall like she was queen of the neighborhood. I had told her again and again to end this, but she refused. She had twisted my words, painted me as the bad guy, and now she was daring me to push back harder. As I stood there, watching more people drift toward the barn, I knew I couldn't let it go on any longer. I stepped in front of them, blocking the doorway. "This barn is off limits," I said, raising my voice so everyone nearby could hear. No one is allowed inside. It's not safe and you don't have permission. The crowd hesitated. Some turned back, others lingered. I could see the uncertainty on their faces. Then she appeared behind me, her voice sharp and loud. Don't listen to him. He doesn't want to share. He thinks he can shut out the community, but that's not how this works. I turned on her, my patience gone. You've had your fun. Now it's over. Everyone needs to leave. This is trespassing, and I won't say it again. The air shifted. The word trespassing hung there like a stone dropped in water, rippling through the group. Some of the neighbors looked uneasy, and I thought maybe they'd finally start leaving. But she wasn't about to let that happen. She pulled out her phone with a dramatic flourish, holding it up like a weapon. Fine, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. If you're going to make a scene, I'll let the authorities settle it. I frowned, confused. What are you talking about? She tapped her screen and pressed it to her ear. Yes, hello, this is an emergency, she said, her voice trembling in that fake way she used when she wanted to sound like a victim. I'm at the ranch on Old Creek Road. There's a man here causing trouble. He's trespassing, he's threatening me, and I'm afraid for my safety. The words hit me like a punch. I stepped back in shock. Are you out of your mind? This is my property. But she turned slightly away, still speaking into the phone, her voice loud so everyone could hear. Yes, he's shouting, he's being aggressive. Please send someone right away. A hush fell over the crowd. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me, then at her. Some looked skeptical. Others looked frightened, as if maybe they believed her. My chest burned with anger, but underneath it all was disbelief. She had just called 911 on me for standing on my own land. I ran a hand over my face, trying to calm the storm brewing inside. Losing my temper would only make things worse. She wanted me to explode. She wanted me to yell so that when the officers arrived, I would look exactly like the villain she was painting me to be. I took a deep breath and forced my voice to stay even. Everyone here knows this is my ranch. I live here. I work here. I own this land. She doesn't. The crowd shifted again. Some nodded slightly, but no one stepped forward to speak up for me. The silence was deafening. She ended her call and slipped the phone back into her pocket with a satisfied smirk. They're on their way, she said. We'll see who's really in the wrong. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. People I had known for years. People I had helped when their fences fell, when their animals wandered, when they needed tools or a hand with heavy lifting. And now, not one of them was standing up for me. That was the part that hurt the most. I turned and walked back toward my porch, leaving the crowd buzzing with whispers. She followed me with her eyes, smug and unbothered, standing there like she had already won. Inside the house, I paced the living room. My mind spun in circles. I knew the deputies who worked this county. Most of them had been here before for routine checks or to handle lost livestock. They knew me and they knew this ranch. But still, the fact that I had to explain myself on my own property was infuriating. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Through the window, I saw people milling around, waiting, glancing nervously toward the road. She was still out there, standing tall, speaking to small groups like she was reassuring them. Finally, headlights appeared down the lane. The chatter outside grew louder as a sheriff's vehicle pulled up, dust rising behind it. I stepped outside and stood at the edge of the porch, my hands at my sides. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. 2 deputies climbed out of the vehicle. They looked around at the crowd, then at me. One of them recognized me and gave a small nod. Evening. What's going on here? Before I could answer, she rushed forward, waving her arms like she was drowning. Officers, thank goodness you're here. That man, he doesn't belong here. He showed up and started yelling at everyone. He scared the children. He's been harassing me. The deputies looked at me. I didn't move. I just said, "This is my ranch," she gasped dramatically. "No, it isn't." He's lying. "This place is under HOA control, and he has no authority to kick us out. He's trespassing. He's dangerous." The deputies exchanged a look. One of them asked me, "Do you have proof this is your property?" "Of course," I said. My voice stayed calm, but my hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out my wallet. I handed them my ID, then added, "I also have the deed inside if you need to see it." They glanced at the ID, then at me, then at the house. One of them asked, "How long have you lived here?" 10 years, I answered. "This is my home, my ranch, my responsibility. I've never given permission for any event." I came back early from a trip and found all of this happening without my knowledge. The deputies turned to her. Is that true? She sputtered, her confidence flickering for the first time. No, it's not like that. He's twisting it. The HOA has authority. Everyone knows that? One deputy shook his head. Ma'am, the HOA doesn't override property deeds. If this land belongs to him, you don't have the right to host events here. Her face reddened, but she tried to recover. He's just being selfish. He never participates in the community. I was doing something good for everyone. You can't let him get away with this. The deputies weren't buying it. They asked me to bring out my property papers, and I did. I laid the deed right in their hands. They studied it, then handed it back. This checks out, one said. He turned to her. Ma'am, you don't have any authority here. You can't call an event on someone else's land, and you certainly can't call the property owner a trespasser. This needs to end right now. Her mouth fell open. But look at all these people. They'll be so disappointed. He doesn't care about the neighborhood. The deputy's tone hardened. Ma'am, that's not your decision to make. Everyone needs to leave immediately. The crowd, which had been silent until then, began to scatter. Some people hurried to their cars, embarrassed. Others mumbled apologies under their breath as they walked off. She stood frozen in place, her hands shaking, her face twisted with anger. For once, she had no words. I stood quietly, watching as the deputies guided people out. My heart was still pounding, but a weight lifted off my chest. The ranch was mine again. But as I looked at her, standing there red-faced and fuming, I knew this wasn't the last time she'd try something. And I also knew, next time, I'd be ready. The deputies stayed until the last car left the driveway. One by one, the neighbors who had once been laughing and smiling on my lawn shuffled back to their vehicles, their heads down, avoiding my eyes. The lively noise that had filled the air only an hour ago was gone, replaced by the soft sound of crickets and the distant rustle of trees. It should have felt like relief, but it didn't. Not yet. I stood there on the porch, arms crossed, watching as the deputy spoke with her one last time. She was still trying to argue, still trying to twist the story into something that made her look like the victim. Her arms flew around as she gestured, her voice sharp and fast, her face red with fury. But the deputies weren't having it. One of them pointed firmly toward the road, telling her it was time to go. She froze, stunned, like she couldn't believe they were siding with me. Then, with a sharp shake of her head, she stormed off toward her car. She slammed the door, started the engine, and peeled away, gravel spitting out from under her tires. The quiet that followed was heavy. I finally exhaled, realizing how tense my shoulders had been. The deputies came back over. Sorry about that, one of them said. You did the right thing keeping calm. She was trying to push your buttons, I nodded. She almost succeeded. The other deputy gave me a small smile. We'll file a report. If she tries something like this again, you'll have documentation on your side. For now, though, you should be fine. Everyone saw the truth tonight. Everyone saw her lie. I corrected softly. The deputies didn't argue. They tipped their hats and headed back to their vehicle. As their headlights disappeared down the road, I was left standing alone in the quiet night. For the first time in hours, my ranch was mine again. But the peace I usually felt wasn't there. I walked slowly around the yard, surveying the mess that had been left behind. Empty bottles and wrappers lay scattered in the grass. My fence by the corral had a fresh crack where kids had climbed it. The barn doors were smudged with fingerprints. It felt like someone had invaded not just my property, but my sense of home. I picked up a few stray cups and wrappers, tossing them into a bag as I walked. The small task helped calm me down, gave my hands something to do while my mind tried to process everything that had happened. I replayed the evening in my head, over and over. The smug look on her face, the way the neighbors had clapped when she spoke, the silence when I asked for support. It all stung in ways I didn't expect. I had always known she liked control. She had shown it in HOA meetings, in emails, and the way she treated anyone who questioned her. But tonight had been different. Tonight she had stepped across a line that most people wouldn't dare approach. She had used my land as her stage, my reputation as her prop, and my neighbors as her audience. And then, when confronted with the truth, she had called 911 and accused me of being the trespasser. The thought made me stop walking. I looked out across the fields, the sky now dark except for a thin strip of orange on the horizon. The stars were starting to appear. I realized something important then. She wasn't going to stop. Not because she had a legal right. Not because she truly believed she was helping, but because she thrived on control. Because the more she could take from others, the stronger she felt. And if I didn't take steps to protect myself, she'd try again. Maybe not next week, maybe not even next month, but eventually. I walked back to the house, pulled out my folder of property papers, and set them on the table. Tomorrow I'd be making copies. I'd take them to the county office, to the sheriff's office, even to the HOA if I had to. I wanted no more confusion about who owned this land. I spent the rest of the night cleaning. It was quiet work, but steady. I fixed the crack in the fence, swept the porch, and gathered up the trash. By the time I finally sat down, it was past midnight. My body was sore, but my mind was calmer. The next morning, word had already spread. I went into town to run errands, and at the cafe, I overheard two neighbors talking about what happened out at the ranch. They didn't see me at first, so I listened quietly. "She really crossed a line this time," one of them said. "Calling the cops on him? That's crazy." "I thought she had permission at first," the other admitted. "She sounded so confident, but now, I don't trust a word she says." I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe people had believed her in the moment, but the truth had settled in afterward. When they noticed me, their faces turned red. "Hey," one said awkwardly. "We're sorry about last night." We should have spoken up. We knew it didn't feel right. I nodded. "I get it." She can be convincing. They looked guilty, but also relieved that I wasn't holding it against them. And in that moment, I realized something else. Her power only worked when people were too scared to push back. When they actually stopped and thought about it, they could see through her. Over the next few days, more neighbors reached out. Some stopped by the ranch, offering to help repair the damage. Others sent messages apologizing for going along with her event. And little by little, the tension that had hung over me began to ease. As for her, I didn't see her for a while. Rumors spread that the HOA board was holding an emergency meeting about her behavior. Some people wanted her removed from the board entirely. Others wanted restrictions placed on what she could organize. I stayed out of it. I had no interest in their politics. I just wanted my peace back. But one evening, about a week later, I spotted her car creeping down the road. She slowed as she passed my gate, staring in, her face hard and unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might stop. But she didn't. She pressed the gas and drove on. I stood on the porch watching until the taillights disappeared. Maybe she would try something again. Maybe not. But either way, I wasn't the same person I had been before this. I had seen what she was willing to do, and I had faced it head on. And more importantly, I had learned something about myself. I wasn't just the quiet neighbor with the ranch at the edge of town. I wasn't the loner who kept to myself. I was someone who could stand his ground, even when it felt like the whole neighborhood was against him. That realization mattered more than anything she could take from me. That night, as I sat on the porch with the stars overhead and the fields stretched out around me, I finally felt the peace I had been missing. The ranch was quiet. The land was mine, and no matter what she tried in the future, that truth wasn't going to change. The days after the chaos felt strangely quiet. At first I thought I was just imagining it, but then I realized it was real. The usual buzz of cars slowing near my property, people walking their dogs by the fence, or kids wandering too close. It all stopped. Neighbors gave me space now. They waved from a distance but didn't step foot on my land. Part of me appreciated it. After everything that happened, I needed that space. But another part of me felt uneasy, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. It was as though the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. The HOA board finally sent out an email. I opened it late one evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The subject line was Community Update. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. Inside, the message was polite but firm. They acknowledged recent events without naming me or her directly. They said the board was reviewing serious concerns regarding conduct and overreach, and that changes might be coming. It was clear what they meant. They didn't want another scene like the one on my ranch. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It felt strange reading their carefully chosen words, knowing the truth behind them. They were trying to soften it, to make it sound like just another administrative issue, but it wasn't. It had been a public humiliation, a manipulation, and almost a disaster. I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples. I wanted to believe it was over, but deep down I knew better. People like her didn't just walk away. They waited. They planned. And then they tried again. A week later, that suspicion proved right. I was working in the barn repairing a section of the roof when I heard voices near the front gate. At first, I thought it was just passers-by, but when I stepped outside, I saw her. She was standing at the gate with two other board members. One held a folder stuffed with papers. The other had a stiff expression, as though they would rather be anywhere else. I walked down the path, keeping my steps steady. "What do you want?" I asked. She smiled, too wide, too forced. "We're here to clear the air. The board felt it was best if we met face to face." The man with the folder nodded, though he didn't meet my eyes. "We're trying to settle things peacefully." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to settle. This land is mine, always has been." Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. Of course. Nobody's disputing ownership. But the neighborhood has concerns. They feel cut off. They feel like you're isolating yourself." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "After what happened, you're surprised I want distance?" She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "It doesn't have to be this way. If you just work with us, we could turn this property into something wonderful. Imagine community gardens, small festivals, shared spaces." I cut her off. "No, this isn't community land. This is my home." The man with the folder shifted uncomfortably. "We're not trying to take it," he said softly. "But we do need some assurances. People are nervous and about what?" I asked sharply. He hesitated, glancing at her before answering. "About you. About your reaction that night. Some think you overreacted." The words hit like a slap. I could see her smirk forming in the corner of my vision. She'd planted the seed. Even after she'd been exposed, she was twisting the story, making me out to be the unstable one. I took a deep breath. "You trespassed. You brought dozens of people onto my land without permission. You called the police on me, and now you're saying I overreacted?" The man had no answer. The woman beside him finally spoke up. "Look, we just want peace, but if you keep pushing against the board, it'll only make things harder for you." There it was, the unspoken threat. They couldn't take my land, but they could make life miserable. Fines, rules, constant pressure. I met her gaze, holding it until she looked away. Then I said quietly, "I'm not afraid of you. Any of you. This ranch has stood longer than your board, and it'll stand long after." I turned and walked back up the path, leaving them at the gate. They didn't follow. A minute later, I heard their car door slam and the engine start. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. It was clear she wasn't done. She was still trying to claw back control, using the board as her shield. But something had changed. The others weren't as eager to follow her lead. I had seen it in their faces, in the way they avoided eye contact. She was losing her grip. The following weekend, the board held a public meeting at the community center. Normally, I never went to those. But this time, I showed up. When I walked in, the room went quiet. All eyes turned toward me. Some people whispered. Others shifted in their chairs. She was at the front, standing beside a projector screen, notes in hand. Her smile faltered when she saw me. The meeting began with routine topics, budget updates, maintenance schedules. I listened, arms crossed, waiting. Then the subject changed. She cleared her throat. "Now about the recent situation at the ranch. There have been misunderstandings, and I want to set the record straight." Her voice was smooth, practiced. She painted herself as a volunteer who had only wanted to bring people together. She said she regretted how things looked, but insisted her intentions were good. Then she turned the focus onto me. "Unfortunately," she said, "our neighbor responded with hostility. He's been uncooperative, and this tension is hurting all of us." I stood. "That's not the truth." The room fell silent. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "You all saw what happened. She invited you onto land she doesn't own. She told you it was community property when it isn't. And when I stood up for myself, she called the police and lied about me." Murmurs filled the room. I continued. "This isn't about community spirit. This is about control. She wanted to play host, to act like she owned something she didn't, and she dragged all of you into it." For the first time, I saw cracks in her confidence. Her cheeks flushed red. She tried to speak, but the murmurs grew louder.